They arrived an hour late to my birthday and called me a burden. They thought I was just a helpless old woman they could ignore. They forgot that I owned the luxury penthouse they lived in, and their eviction notice was already printed. 72 years is a long time to learn the art of patience. But even the patience of a saint has a breaking point, and mine was beginning to fracture at 8:15 in the evening on a Tuesday. I sat alone at a table for 4 inside a restaurant called Blue's Corner, watching the wax from a single birthday candle drip slowly onto the pristine white tablecloth. The flame flickered, fighting against the draft from the front door every time a customer walked in, but it was not the guests I was waiting for. I had arrived at 7 o'clock in the evening sharp. I was wearing my best silk blouse, a deep navy blue that my late husband George had bought for me in Florence 30 years ago, and the pearl earrings my mother had left me in her will. I sat with my hands folded in my lap, nursing a glass of sparkling water that had long since lost its fizz, watching other families laugh, toast, and break bread. Blue's Corner was not a 5-star establishment if you judged it by the Michelin Guide, but to me, it was royalty. It was a historic soul food and jazz spot on the south side of Chicago, with red vinyl booths that had held generations of secrets and walls lined with black and white photographs of musicians who had played on the small stage in the corner. The air smelled of paprika, slow-simmered collard greens, and the deep, savory scent of gumbo that had been bubbling since dawn. It smelled like home. It smelled like history. But to the people I was waiting for, I knew it would just smell like grease. My son, Marcus, and his wife, Paige, were now 1 hour and 15 minutes late. I took a slow sip of my warm water and looked at the empty chair across from me. I did not check my watch again. I did not want the waitress, a kind woman named Betty who had known me for 20 years, to see me checking. Dignity, my mother always told me, is the one thing you never leave at the door. Most people looked at me, Esther Haynes, and saw a retired nurse living on a pension. They saw a quiet, older African-American woman who drove a 10-year-old sedan and lived in the same brick bungalow she had purchased with her husband in 1982. They saw a woman who clipped coupons for the grocery store and wore sensible shoes. They did not see the truth. They did not see that George and I had not just worked jobs, we had bought land. In the late 80s and 90s, when everyone else was fleeing the city or afraid to touch the crumbling brownstones, George and I were buying. We bought quiet lots. We bought apartment buildings that needed new roofs. We bought commercial spaces that needed new wiring. We lived simply, almost frugally, pouring every extra dime into mortgages and renovations. When George passed away 5 years ago, he left behind an empire of brick and mortar, hidden behind a series of limited liability companies. I owned apartment complexes in Hyde Park. I owned retail spaces in the Loop. And, unbeknownst to my own son, I owned the Meridian Lofts, the gleaming glass tower downtown, where he and his wife currently lived. I kept this secret for a reason. Money changes people. It acts like a corrosive acid, stripping away character until only greed is left. I wanted my son to love me for who I was, not for what I could sign over to him. But as the clock ticked toward 8:30, I began to wonder if there was anything left to love at all. If you have ever felt taken for granted by the very people you sacrificed your life to raise, go ahead and press that like button right now. Do it for every mother who sat alone at a table while her children found better things to do. Finally, the bell above the door chimed aggressively. The heavy oak door swung open, letting in a blast of cold October wind that nearly extinguished my candle. There they were. Paige entered first. She was a swirl of chaotic energy and expensive fabrics. She was a tall, slender white woman with hair highlighted to a shade of blonde that did not exist in nature, wearing a beige trench coat that likely cost more than the annual renovation budget of this restaurant. She stood in the entryway, wrinkling her nose as if she had just stepped into a sanitation facility rather than a beloved neighborhood institution. Marcus trailed behind her, looking shrinking and exhausted. My son was a handsome man, tall and broad-shouldered like his father, but in the last 3 years of his marriage to Paige, he seemed to have folded in on himself. He held her purse in one hand and his phone in the other, his eyes darting around the room nervously. They did not rush over to me. There was no running, no arms wide open. Instead, Paige stopped to inspect the bottom of her heel, sighing loudly enough for the hoststand to hear. "God, Marcus," she said, her voice carrying over the low hum of the jazz saxophone. "This floor is sticky. I told you I should not have worn the Valentinos. This is a hazmat situation." Marcus mumbled, something soothing, and pointed toward my table. When they finally reached me, there was no hug. Paige threw her coat over the back of the chair, nearly knocking over the salt shaker, and sat down with a huff. "Happy birthday, Mom," Marcus said, leaning in to give me a quick dry peck on the cheek. He smelled of Paige's cloying floral perfume and stress. "We are so sorry," Paige said, though her tone suggested she was the one who had been inconvenienced. She pulled out a compact mirror and began aggressively checking her lipstick. The traffic on Lakeshore Drive was absolute hell. And then the GPS took us through some really sketchy streets to get to this place. "I honestly thought we were going to get carjacked." "It is a historic district, Paige," I said softly, my hands still folded. "It is where Marcus grew up." "Right," she said, snapping the mirror shut. "Well, it is certainly charming in a gritty, urban decay sort of way. Can we get some wine? I need a drink if I am going to survive this lighting. It is doing zero favors for my complexion." She waved her hand in the air without looking, summoning Betty as if she were a servant in a Victorian manner. "Hello, Mrs. Haynes," Betty said, ignoring Paige's hand and smiling warmly at me. "Happy birthday, sugar. You want me to bring out the gumbo and the fried chicken now?" "Please, Betty," I said. "Thank you." "Wait," Paige interrupted. She picked up the laminated menu, holding it by the very corner as if it were contaminated. "Fried chicken? Is there anything on this menu that is not a heart attack on a plate? Do you have any kale? Or maybe a poached salmon?" Betty looked at Paige, her expression unreadable. "We have collard greens, honey, and we have catfish, fried or blackened." "Blackened," Paige said, wrinkling her nose again. "Fine, but no butter. And put the sauce on the side. Actually, do not bring the sauce at all. I do not trust it." "And for you, Marcus?" Betty asked, turning her back to Paige. Marcus looked at the menu, then at his wife. I knew he loved the smothered pork chops. It was his favorite meal growing up. I used to make it for him every Sunday after church. I saw his eyes drift toward it, but then he saw Paige glaring at him. "I will just have the house salad," Marcus said quietly. "Dressing on the side." "A salad," I repeated, unable to stop myself. "Marcus, it is a celebration. You are a grown man." "We are watching our cholesterol, Esther," Paige interceded, flashing a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Marcus has put on a little weight lately, and we want to keep him trim for our vacation photos." I took a deep breath. "Vacation? I thought you said work was overwhelming, Marcus. You told me last week you could not come to fix my porch railing because you were pulling 80-hour weeks." Marcus flushed, staring intently at his water glass. It is just a planned trip, Mom. Later in the year?" "Cabo," Paige announced, pulling her phone out to scroll. "We need the sun. This city is so dreary in the fall. Honestly, I do not know how you stand living in that little brick box of yours all winter. It must get so depressing." "My home is warm," I said, my voice steady. "And it is paid for." Paige laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "Well, sure, but it is so isolated. Marcus and I were talking, and we really think you should consider selling. There are some lovely assisted living facilities closer to the city. Smaller, less maintenance. You know, for people at your stage." My stage. I was 72, not invalid. I walked 3 miles every morning. I managed a multi-million-dollar real estate portfolio. I did the New York Times crossword puzzle in pen. "I am happy where I am," I said. The food arrived, steaming and fragrant. Betty placed a large bowl of gumbo in front of me, rich with okra, sausage, and shrimp. The smell brought tears to my eyes, reminding me of the anniversaries George and I had celebrated in this very booth. She placed the dry salad in front of Marcus and the blackened catfish in front of Paige. Paige looked at the fish as if it were a dead rat. She picked up her fork, poked it once, and pushed the plate away. "I cannot eat this," she announced. "It is swimming in oil. Marcus, look at this. It is literally glistening. I can feel my arteries clogging just looking at it." "Eat your salad, Paige," Marcus whispered. "I am not going to eat rabbit food while sitting in a grease trap," she snapped. She turned to me. "Esther, I hope you do not expect us to stay long. I have an early morning with a client, and honestly, the smell in here is sticking to my hair. I am going to have to wash it 3 times to get the fryer stink out." I looked at her. I looked at the way she sneered at the culture that built this neighborhood. I looked at the way she belittled my son. I looked at the way she treated me not as a matriarch, but as a nuisance. If you have family members who treat your heritage like a joke and your kindness like a weakness, you know the fire that was starting to burn in my chest. Subscribe to the channel right now if you want to see exactly how I handle people who mistake silence for stupidity. "Eat, Marcus," I said to my son. "It is your birthday dinner too, in a way. I gave birth to you." "Mom, please," Marcus said, looking miserable. Let us just have a nice time." "We would be having a nice time if we went to Le Bernardin like I suggested," Paige muttered. "But no, we had to come to the hood for authenticity." She said the word authenticity like it was a slur. I put my spoon down. The gumbo suddenly tasted like ash in my mouth. "I am going to use the restroom," I said, standing up. "Excuse me." "Take your purse," Paige advised loudly. "You never know who is lurking in the hallways in a place like this." I ignored her and walked toward the back of the restaurant. The hallway was narrow, lined with vintage posters of jazz festivals from the 60s. I needed a moment to breathe. I needed a moment to remind myself that I was a Christian woman who believed in turning the other cheek, even though my hand was itching to turn something else. I entered the restroom and washed my hands with the pink soap from the dispenser. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were tired, but they were sharp. I adjusted my pearl earring. "You are Esther Haynes," I told myself. "You built a life from nothing. You do not let a girl who has never worked a hard day in her life break you." I dried my hands and opened the door to leave. As I stepped into the hallway, I heard a voice. It was Paige. She was standing just around the corner, near the payphone that nobody used anymore, holding her cell phone to her ear. She did not see me. I stopped. I know I should have kept walking. Eavesdroppers never hear good of themselves, my grandmother used to say. But my feet felt rooted to the linoleum floor. "Oh my God, Stephanie, it is a nightmare," Paige was saying, her voice echoing in the small corridor. "We are at this dump on the south side. I am literally starving because I refuse to eat the slop they serve here. And I am sitting across from Marcus's mother, who is looking at me like I am the devil just because I have standards." She paused, listening to the person on the other line, and then laughed. It was a cruel, ugly sound. "No, she has no idea," Paige said, dropping her voice slightly. "She thinks Marcus is just working hard. If she knew the truth, she would probably have a heart attack right here in the booth, which honestly might solve a few of our problems." My heart hammered against my ribs. "What truth?" I know," Paige continued. "Look, the Cabo trip is non-negotiable. I need those Instagram photos for my brand. Who cares if we are behind on rent? We are 3 months behind, Steph." 3 months. But what are they going to do? Kick us out? She laughed again. "It is a huge building," she said dismissively. "The Meridian Lofts. The landlord is just some faceless corporation, Haynes Holdings or something. They probably have so many units they haven't even noticed we haven't paid since August. By the time they send a notice, Marcus will have his bonus. Or we can just ask the old lady for a loan for her medical bills or something. She believes anything Marcus tells her. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. They were not just late, they were not just rude, they were thieves. My son and his wife were living in my building, the jewel of my portfolio. They were living in a 3-bedroom corner unit with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan, a unit that rented for $5,500 a month. And they had not paid rent in 3 months. $15,000. Stealing $15,000 to go to Cabo and take pictures, while sitting at my table and calling my home a brick box. And the worst part? The landlord she was mocking, the faceless corporation she thought was too stupid to notice? It was me. I stood there in the hallway, the jazz music thumping through the walls. A cold calm washed over me. It was colder than the wind outside. It was the absolute zero of a mother's love finally freezing over. She thought I was a burden. She thought I was a fool. She thought I was just an ATM machine with a pulse. I stepped back into the restroom silently and waited for her to finish her call. I counted to 10. Then, I counted to 20. When I heard her heels clicking back toward the dining room, I waited another full minute before following. When I returned to the table, Paige was already seated, scrolling through her phone again. Marcus was picking at his salad like a man on death row. "Everything okay, Mom?" Marcus asked, looking up. "Everything is clear," I said. I sat down. I did not pick up my spoon. I signaled Betty. "We are ready for the check," I said. "Oh, thank God," Paige breathed. Finally, I was about to call an Uber just to escape the smell. Betty brought the leather folder. Marcus made a half-hearted motion toward his wallet, the dance of the man who pretends to pay but hopes he does not have to. "I have it," I said firmly. I opened my purse. I pulled out my black credit card, the one issued to Haynes Holdings, the one I usually kept hidden in a zippered compartment. I placed it on the tray. "Mom, are you sure?" Marcus asked weakly. "It is your birthday. Consider it my gift to you," I said, my eyes locking on Paige. I know how tight money can be, especially with vacations to plan. Paige froze. For a second, a flicker of fear crossed her face, but she smoothed it over quickly. "You know about Cabo?" "Marcus mentioned it," I lied smoothly. "It sounds expensive." "We deserve it," Paige said, regaining her composure. "Work hard, play hard, right?" "Right," I said. Betty returned with the receipt. I signed it with a flourish. I stood up, smoothing my silk blouse. "Well," I said, "thank you for coming. I know it was a sacrifice for you to come all this way." "It was lovely, Esther," Paige lied, standing up and throwing her coat on. "We really must do it again, maybe somewhere closer to downtown next time." My treat. "Oh, I think I will be seeing you downtown very soon," I said. A small, enigmatic smile played on my lips. "Sooner than you think." "What does that mean?" Marcus asked, frowning. "Just that life is full of surprises, Marcus," I said. "Drive safe. The roads can be treacherous when you do not see what is coming." I walked out of Blue's Corner into the night air. I did not look back at them. I walked to my car, unlocked the door, and sat in the driver's seat. I looked at my hands on the steering wheel. They were not shaking. I took out my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. It was 9 o'clock in the evening, but I knew he would answer. "Hello, Mr. Henderson," I said when the voice answered. "This is Esther Haynes." "Mrs. Haynes," the property manager said, sounding surprised. "Is everything all right?" "It is late." "Everything is fine, Mr. Henderson," I said, starting the engine. "But I need you to pull the file on Unit 4B at the Meridian Lofts. Marcus Haynes and Paige Haynes." "4B?" he asked. "Yes, I have been meaning to call you about that. They are severely delinquent. I was going to send another email, but—" "Do not send an email," I interrupted. "Prepare a notice for an owner's inspection. I want to inspect the unit myself." "Yourself?" Henderson stammered. "Mrs. Haynes, you never visit the properties personally. You always prefer to remain anonymous." "Not anymore," I said, watching the lights of the city reflect in my rearview mirror. "I will be there the day after tomorrow, 9 o'clock in the morning. And Mr. Henderson?" "Yes, ma'am." "Prepare the eviction papers. Have them ready for my signature." I hung up the phone and pulled out into traffic. The jazz from the restaurant faded behind me, replaced by the hum of the engine. They thought I was a helpless old woman. They thought I was a brick in a wall they could ignore. They were about to learn that I was the wrecking ball. The drive back to my modest brick bungalow felt strangely shorter than the drive out. I did not turn on the radio. The only sound was the low hum of the engine and the relentless ticking of the small, antique clock on my dashboard, which George had insisted on installing years ago because he hated relying on digital time. "Always know the time," he used to say, "and always know the value of your assets." I pulled the car into my driveway, the tires crunching softly on the gravel. I looked at the house Paige had called a brick box. It was quiet, solid, and unassuming. It was my sanctuary. It was paid for, and it contained the very truth that Paige was about to learn the hard way. I walked through the kitchen, ignoring the dinner I had prepared hours earlier that sat cooling on the counter, and went straight to my study. The study was dark and smelled faintly of leather and old books. I shut the door and walked to the wall behind my desk, where a large, framed print of a peaceful seaside scene hung slightly crookedly. I reached behind the painting, feeling for the cold metal of the combination dial. I input the 6 digits, my wedding anniversary, followed by the year George passed, and the lock gave a soft mechanical click. I slid the painting aside. There it was, the heavy black steel of the wall safe. I was not angry anymore. Anger is chaotic, and I needed clarity. I needed the cold, clean dignity of a contract. I pulled out a thin, cream-colored folder labeled Haynes Holdings, Meridian Lofts, 4B. Inside were the hard truths: the deed, the original lease agreement signed by Marcus and Page, and the internal rent ledger provided by Mr. Henderson, my property manager. The ledger was damning. June payment, received. July payment, received. August payment, missed. September payment, missed. October payment, missed. The amount due was now $15,000, not including the late fees that Mr. Henderson had kindly waived because Marcus had emailed him a heartfelt lie about my supposed sudden health crisis requiring expensive private care. My son had lied to steal money from me indirectly. He had used the image of his sick mother as a shield for his wife's reckless spending. That was the final insult. That betrayal tasted worse than the ashes of the ruined gumbo. I walked over to my desk and picked up the telephone. I did not use my cell phone for business like this. I used the heavy landline, the one with the secure connection. Mr. Henderson, my property manager, answered immediately. He was a white man in his late 50s, a good man who had handled George's properties for 20 years. He was thorough, professional, and utterly loyal to me, the silent owner. Mr. Henderson, I said, my voice low and level, I need you to confirm the balance on Unit 4B. Mrs. Haynes, I am so glad you called, he sighed. I was just about to contact you. They are 3 months delinquent. I have sent 3 notices, but they have ignored them all. I have been fielding emails from Marcus, and frankly, they have been emotionally manipulative. Tell me what he wrote, I instructed. He wrote that his family is dealing with an unforeseen crisis, Mr. Henderson said. Specifically, that his mother, meaning you, is suffering from a degenerative illness that requires expensive, non-covered treatment. He wrote that all their savings, and some of his income, have been diverted to your care, leaving them unable to meet their monthly obligations. A cold, hard laugh escaped my lips. I see. So while I am supposedly dying slowly and expensively, they are stealing $5,000 a month for a trip to Cabo. Cabo? Mr. Henderson asked, confused. I am sorry, Mrs. Haynes. I thought you were ill. I am as healthy as the day I was born, Mr. Henderson. That is the point. I am not ill. They are not struggling. They are lying. And they are living in my building, on my charity, while mocking me at my birthday dinner. There was a long silence on the line. Mrs. Haynes, he said finally, his voice hardening with professional disdain. I am truly sorry. I had no idea. Now you do, I said. Now we move. You want me to commence eviction proceedings immediately? Yes, but with a personal touch, I said, leaning back in my chair, already visualizing the scene. I need you to schedule the owner's inspection for the day after tomorrow, Thursday, at 9 o'clock in the morning. Send them an official email tonight. I want it on their phones when they wake up. An owner's inspection? He repeated. But you have never. I am done being anonymous. Mr. Henderson, I am going to meet them in person. And I need you to emphasize in that email that the owner will be present to assess the violation of the lease terms. Understood, he said. It will be done tonight. And the eviction papers? Have them ready, I said. 3 copies. Everything in order. I want the termination to be swift, clean, and irreversible. I hung up the phone. I stood there, looking at the ceiling. The Meridian Lofts. I remembered when George and I had bought the land in 1994. Everyone thought we were crazy. Now, it was a gleaming tower, a testament to decades of sacrifice and silence, and my ungrateful daughter-in-law was using it as a prop for her frivolous social media life. For the next day, I became a detective. I did not call Marcus. I did not text Paige. I did not warn them. Instead, I went online. I found Paige's public Instagram profile, which she used to promote her fashion public relations work. The evidence was nauseating. There were pictures of Paige and Marcus lounging on a deck chair next to turquoise water. The date stamp was late August, exactly when the first rent payment was missed. The caption read, "Needed this spontaneous Cabo getaway. Sometimes you just have to prioritize your peace, you know." I saw pictures of her unboxing a new designer handbag in September, just as the second month's rent was due. The caption, "Treat yourself, ladies. You deserve it." Then, just 3 days ago, there was a photo of her wearing a ridiculously expensive silk dress inside the Meridian Lofts apartment, laughing with 2 of her white friends holding champagne flutes. The caption, "Apartment life is the best life. So glad we landed this unit. It's heaven. Heaven built on lies." She never used the word rent. She never used the word landlord. She talked about the apartment as if it were a natural extension of her own entitlement. She truly believed the money was endless. She truly believed I was too old, too slow, and too geographically distant to ever connect the dots between her spoiled life and the financial hole she was digging. I printed out all the photos. I printed out her captions. I printed out the calendar of missed payments. I placed them all neatly into the Unit 4B folder. I wanted to see the receipts laid out cold, hard, and undeniable. That night, Marcus called me. It was 7:30 in the evening. I let the phone ring twice before answering. "Mom, did you get the email?" Marcus sounded frantic, his usual smooth architect voice cracking with panic. "Hello, Marcus. Which email are you referring to?" I asked, folding laundry as if nothing were wrong. "The one from the building management. About the inspection. Did you see it? Did you hear anything about the owner being involved?" "Oh, that," I said lightly. "Yes, I did see that email. It came through about an hour ago. Why are you concerned, son? You told me everything was fine with your rental agreement." "No. Well, it is just stressful, Mom. You know how these big companies are?" he stammered. "The rent is a little backed up right now. I was going to call you. I need about $5,000 to cover the October payment, just to keep them quiet. Can you help me out, Mom? Just this once. It is an emergency." I paused my folding. "An emergency, Marcus? My goodness, that sounds very serious. You know, I am just on a fixed income, son. You know I live simply. I do not have $5,000 just lying around." "But Mom, you have savings. Please, they are talking about eviction. I will pay you back next month." His desperation was naked, ugly, and entirely directed at preserving his comfortable lie. "You should have thought about the rent when you booked your vacation," I said, the pleasant tone dropping instantly. There was a silence on the line, a silence filled with his shock, followed by dawning guilt. "What did you say?" he whispered. "I said you should have thought about the rent when you booked your vacation to Cabo," I repeated clearly. "Do not worry about the rent now, Marcus. Worry about the inspection. I have a feeling the owner is going to have some very pointed questions for you both." I did not wait for his response. I ended the call. I did not hate my son, but I was done enabling him. I was done allowing him to hide behind his wife's cruelty and his own weakness. He had chosen his side, and he had chosen the lie. The following morning, Thursday, I put on the suit I had not worn in a decade. It was a crisp, tailored black ensemble, the kind of suit that demanded respect without needing to ask for it. I applied my makeup with the same meticulous care I used when preparing to give testimony in court. I was not dressing as Marcus's mother. I was not dressing as the retired Mrs. Haynes. I was dressing as the owner. I looked at myself in the full-length mirror. My hair was swept up neatly. My shoulders were straight. I looked like a woman who carried immense weight and who was finally ready to put it down. At 8:30 in the morning, I drove the 10 miles from my modest bungalow to the gleaming glass tower of the Meridian Lofts downtown. As I pulled up to the curb, I saw Mr. Henderson waiting for me. He looked sharp in his gray suit, holding a briefcase. When he saw me step out of the car, he approached with an expression that was a mixture of awe and determination. "Mrs. Haynes," he said, extending his hand, "you look formidable." "I am here to conduct business, Mr. Henderson," I replied, shaking his hand firmly. "We are not here to socialize. Do you have the paperwork?" "I do," he confirmed, patting his briefcase. "3 copies of the termination notice. Effective immediately, per the terms of delinquency and breach of contract for falsification of financial hardship." "Good," I said, adjusting the lapel of my jacket. "Let us go collect the rent and the keys." We walked toward the glass doors of the Meridian lofts. The cold dignity of the contract was about to meet the hot shock of reality. The elevator ride to the penthouse level of the Meridian lofts was silent. It was a high-speed lift, the kind that made your ears pop, whisking us upward toward the sky. I stood next to Mr. Henderson, watching the numbers on the digital display climb higher and higher. Floor 20, floor 30, floor 40. My heart was beating a steady, calm rhythm against my ribs. I was not nervous. Nervousness is for people who are unsure of their standing. I knew exactly where I stood. I stood on the deed. I stood on the mortgage. I stood on the solid ground of ownership. When the doors slid open with a soft chime on the 42nd floor, the hallway stretched out before us, lined with plush carpet and modern art. It smelled of expensive cleaning products and filtered air. It was a far cry from the sketchy neighborhood Paige had complained about just 2 nights ago. We walked to the end of the hall. Unit 4B, the corner unit, the best view in the building. Mr. Henderson adjusted his tie, glanced at me for a final nod of approval, and then knocked sharply on the heavy wooden door. There was a muffled sound of panic from inside, the scuffling of feet, a hushed argument, the clatter of something being shoved into a closet. It took nearly a full minute before the lock turned. The door opened. Paige stood there. She was wearing a silk robe that looked like it cost more than my monthly grocery budget, her hair messy in a way that was supposed to look effortless but just looked chaotic. She forced a bright, fake smile when she saw Mr. Henderson, blocking the view into the apartment with her body. "Mr. Henderson," she chirped, her voice an octave higher than usual. "Good morning. We were not expecting you quite so early. Marcus is just finishing a conference call. Can we ask you to wait in the lobby for 10 minutes? The place is a bit of a mess." Mr. Henderson did not smile back. He did not step back. "Good morning, Mrs. Haynes. The notification sent to you stated 9 o'clock in the morning, sharp. It is now 9 o'clock and 30 seconds. Paige's smile faltered. "Right. Well, like I said, it is a bad time. Can we reschedule? Or maybe Marcus can just email you later about the misunderstanding with the bank?" "There is no misunderstanding, Mrs. Haynes," Henderson said smoothly. "And we cannot reschedule. This is a mandatory owner's inspection. As stated in your lease, immediate access must be granted when the owner is present." Paige rolled her eyes, letting out a sharp sigh of annoyance. "Okay, fine. But honestly, does the owner really need to see inside? Can't you just take a picture or something? I am sure he is a very busy man." Mr. Henderson stepped to the side, clearing the space between Paige and myself. "Actually," he said, his voice ringing with professional satisfaction, "she is a very busy woman. Paige, I would like you to meet the owner of the Meridian Lofts and the majority shareholder of Haynes Holdings." I stepped forward from the shadows of the hallway into the light of the doorframe. "Hello, Paige," I said. The color drained from Paige's face so fast it looked like a curtain falling. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked at me, then at Henderson, then back at me, her brain struggling to process the impossible geometry of the moment. Esther Haynes, the woman she mocked in a restaurant 2 nights ago, the woman she called a burden, standing in her doorway in a tailored power suit. "Esther," she finally whispered. What are you doing here?" "I am here to inspect my property," I said, walking past her into the apartment without waiting for an invitation. I stepped into the foyer. It was grand. Floor-to-ceiling windows flooded the space with morning light, offering a panoramic view of Lake Michigan. But the beauty of the architecture was marred by the clutter of entitlement. There were shopping bags from high-end boutiques piled on the dining table, there were empty champagne bottles on the kitchen island, and there, sitting on the sofa with his head in his hands, was Marcus. He looked up when he heard my footsteps. When he saw me, he stood up so quickly he knocked over a coffee mug. It shattered on the floor, splashing dark liquid onto the imported rug. "Mom?" he choked out. "What is going on?" "Leave it," I said sharply as he bent to pick up the shards. "I will have the cleaning crew handle it after you vacate. Stand up, Marcus." He stood, trembling. Paige hurried into the room, cinching her robe tighter, her eyes darting between us. "This is a joke, right?" Paige said, a nervous laugh bubbling up. "Marcus, is this a joke? Did you put her up to this? Is this some kind of intervention because we missed dinner?" "It is not a joke, Paige," I said, running a finger along the granite countertop. It came away dusty. "And it is not an intervention. It is an eviction." "Eviction?" Paige screeched. "You cannot evict us. We are family. And you do not own this place. That is impossible. You live in a brick box on the south side. I live where I choose to live," I said calmly. "And I own what I choose to own. My husband and I bought this building 20 years ago. We built this company from the ground up while you were still learning to tie your expensive shoes." I turned to face them fully. The morning sun created a halo behind me, casting a long shadow over their messy living room. "Mr. Henderson," I said, "please read the lease violation regarding financial disclosure." Henderson opened his folder and began to read, his voice dry and precise. "Tenant agrees that all financial information provided for rent deferment or hardship requests must be accurate and truthful. Any falsification of financial status or personal circumstances to avoid payment is grounds for immediate lease termination." "I did not falsify anything," Marcus protested, sweating. "Really?" I asked. I reached into my purse and pulled out the file I had prepared. I tossed the photos onto the coffee table. They fanned out like a winning poker hand. The photo of them in Cabo, the photo of the designer bags, the photo of the champagne toast. "You told my management company you told me that you could not pay rent because your mother was dying," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than a scream. "You used my life, my health, as an excuse to steal from me." Marcus looked at the photos, then at me. He looked sick. "Mom, I didn't mean it like that. We were drowning, and I didn't know how to tell you." "You were not drowning, Marcus," I snapped. "You were floating in a pool in Cabo while you let your wife insult me to my face, while you let her call me a burden." Paige stepped forward, her face flushing red with anger now instead of fear. The entitlement was fighting back. "Okay, so what? So we went on a trip. Big deal. You have money. Clearly, you have millions if you own this building. Why did you hide it? You tricked us. You let us struggle while you were sitting on a gold mine. That is sick, Esther. That is twisted." "I hid it," I said, stepping closer to her, "because I wanted to know if my son loved me or if he just loved my checkbook. And you, Paige, have made the answer very clear." I looked around the apartment one last time. I looked at the view they had not earned. I looked at the luxury they did not appreciate. "You called my home a brick box," I said. "You said I belonged in a nursing home. You said I was an embarrassment." "I was stressed," Paige cried. "I didn't mean it." "You meant every word," I said. "And now I mean every word of this. You have 72 hours to vacate these premises. If you are not gone by Sunday at noon, the sheriff will remove you." I turned to walk away, but then I stopped. I looked at the camera, breaking the fourth wall for just a moment, because sometimes you have to let the world see the ugliness to understand the beauty of justice. If you have ever had someone smile in your face while they were stabbing you in the back, if you have ever had family who only called when they needed money, hit that subscribe button right now, because we are not just telling stories here. We are taking back our dignity. I turned back to Marcus. He was crying now, silent tears streaming down his face. "Mom," he whispered, "where are we supposed to go? We don't have anywhere else. Our credit is shot." "I hear there are some lovely rentals near the airport," I said, echoing Paige's tone from the restaurant. "Sketchy neighborhood, terrible smell, but very authentic." "Esther, please," Paige begged, grabbing my arm. "You can't do this. Think of your grandchildren. We were going to start trying for a baby next year." I pulled my arm away as if she had burned me. "If you do have children, Paige, I hope you teach them better than you taught yourself. And do not worry about them. If they ever exist, I will make sure they are taken care of. Direct to the school, direct to the doctor, not a penny through you." I walked to the door. Mr. Henderson held it open for me. "Leave the keys on the counter when you go," I said, without looking back. "And clean up that coffee stain. I expect my property to be returned in the condition it was received." Immaculate. The door clicked shut behind us, sealing the silence. We rode the elevator down. 42 floors. By the time we reached the lobby, I felt lighter than air. 2 weeks later, I stood in the same apartment. It was empty. The white walls were bare. The rugs were gone. The smell of Paige's perfume had been scrubbed away by my professional cleaning crew. The sun poured in through the windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. It was just a space now. Wood, glass, steel. It was valuable, yes. It was worth millions. But standing there, in the quiet, I realized that the most expensive thing I owned wasn't the building. It was my peace. Peace is expensive. It costs you people. It costs you uncomfortable conversations. It costs you the illusion of a happy family. But looking at the empty space where the lies used to live, I knew I had paid the price, and it was a bargain. I walked to the window and looked out at the city of Chicago, the city George and I had built our lives in. I took my phone out of my pocket. I had a meeting in an hour with the dean of the architecture school at the local university. I had decided not to rent the unit again. Instead, I was setting up a scholarship foundation. The Haynes Grant. This apartment would house 3 students every year, students who worked hard, who respected their elders, and who knew the value of $1 because they had to earn it. I smiled. Marcus had chosen his path, and now he would have to walk it. I hoped, truly hoped, that poverty would teach him the character that prosperity had stolen. But as for me, I had a porch railing to fix, a garden to tend to, and a life to live on my own terms. I turned my back on the view and walked out the door, leaving it unlocked for the future. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, make sure you like this video and share it with someone who needs a reminder that the quietest people often hold the most power. And do not forget to subscribe for more stories from the ledger of Esther Haynes, because the rent is always due, and the truth always collects. Goodbye for now. And remember, never underestimate a woman who knows the value of her own time.